What's up, TTN fan? Eric here. Today, um, I felt I wanted to do a second episode, second follow up to what I did on Friday, um, just to kind of, clarify like different points of what I was feeling and what I'm doing for processing, for growth, and also just kind of give you, my version of what I've learned throughout this whole, process. So this is going to be more in the lines of why it feels like lying, why it feels like deceit, when in fact they're actually speaking the truth. It's just they're believing their own truth over what the reality of the situation is. So I want to kind of, dive in and, let you know like my standpoint on it, because that is something that I've learned. So here we go. It wasn't meant it wasn't that she was meant to lie in in that her words and her actions belonged to different versions of her. And essentially, our languages, our coping languages, mine and hers, did not. They were oil and water. Every time we tried to come in for repair, if I tried to repair, it blown away. So, this is about the the emotional experience about inconsistency. And again, I'm not accusing anyone here um, of this, right? This is me just simply, speaking from my heart of this experience and what I've learned. This isn't a bash session. It's not a smear campaign at all. All it is just it's informative because it truly is, for lack of a better term, a mind fuck, right? Because here you are doing everything right, and it's getting rejected. It's pushing them further and further away. So I'm going to kind of go into that. Also, I'm not a doctor. I don't have uh, any sort of background in psychology or anything like that. So information is stuff that I've learned through my own research. Feel free. I always encourage people to do their own research on certain things, right? Because my word isn't bond. It's just my experience. Um, this is me speaking from clarity. It's not from anger. I'm well past the anger phase. Um, and I want it to be known from my experience on how, this really, and still, really how it affects me because I've gone through all of this, and it really kind of got my mind going after I did Friday's episode of, I kind of want to go into, the quote unquote neuroscience of emotional inconsistency, and kind of give you my take on it, from what I've learned, and saw within our dynamic while I was there. So, when you're dealing with somebody with, bipolar disorder, um, in one emotional state, everything feels true. In another, everything feels wrong. And with that, I hadn't really experienced that, but in the beginning, you know, it was her, really kind of, jumping on and latching on quickly and opening up and, basically, giving me everything that I thought this relationship that I wanted in a relationship, which was honesty, it was openness, it was clear lines of communication. But when you have somebody who is bipolar, um, that can change in an instant. So which brings me on to the, how they speak. They speak with complete conviction in both states. That's the confusing aspect, right? It's because they will, when everything's good, everything's great. When everything's bad, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, they have everything mapped out, because their mind does not stop. It continues to go and go and go and go and create narratives. And that's, those are unwinnable battles, and that was something that, um, I didn't fully understand until now, um, after kind of seeing everything. Emotional, having the emotional memory changes things drastically for them. So, um, And then, so those are a few different topics on, the bipolar aspect. Now we're going to go into the fearful avoidant attachment, right? Is they want, they have so many wants, right? They want closeness, but they fear it. They want reassurance only. Well, if you want reassurance, they're only going to do it when they're regulated, not when they're dysregulated. They withdraw or contradict themselves when triggered. And that to me, whew, you know, not really, understanding people have gone through past trauma, yes. I get the, the main basis of that, right? But for, um, people who are bipolar and have this fearful avoidant attachment, it hits harder because because they care so deeply and so intense. And that's one thing that, um, I had never experienced before. And again, prior to this relationship, it was very much surface level. Even in my marriage, it was surface level talking. It was surface level information. So to go deep, it's a different experience. Um, and their truth shifts with their fear level because you are not you are going against ghosts, which is ultimately their past. Um, and here's another one of the things: the mind was saying one thing, the body was saying another. But, and I touched on it in Friday's episode, it's the nervous system. And she was wired for survival. She wasn't wired for connection. And that, learning that and hearing it, it's still tough to believe because, in some sort of capacity, like her mind says, I want this, and her body's saying, run as far and fast as you can, or you're getting too close, push away. And that was just a state of dysregulation. One thing that I kind of learned today is, as I was reflecting, it's emotional dyslexia, right? And that was really for, like, communication purposes, like sending an email, um, or talking to them or talking to her and being like, she's like, well, I want consistency, I want presence, I want follow through, and I gave it to her, in every way that I knew, but it wasn't, that's not what she wanted, right? She wanted kind of the opposite. And, or, no, excuse me, let me rephrase that. If she wanted those things and more, problem is that she didn't have the emotional capacity to receive it. And every time I got close and close and close, it was push, 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 push. She didn't know how to, kind of handle, that situation because, um, I truly feel that I was the best relationship, the best partner she had ever had. Honestly, I'm not sitting there trying to, toot my own horn, but, um, like I think it was something that she so desperately wanted, but she didn't have the bandwidth to, kind of accept it and receive it. So now I'm going to go on. Now I'm going to go on to why it felt like lies and deceit. Um, Hearing her say certain things, but they were only temporary. Like the I love you, the I love you, I need you, I want a future with you. Um, and it's something where, looking back at, kind of how the relationship went, and, she was the first to say I love you, and then that stopped. That stopped in, June of this year, and then came back into observation. And the only time it was said is when her guard was down. And when her guard was down, it was after we were physical. We were physically intimate. That's when her guard was down. That's when she told me she loved me. But anything else beyond that, no text, no, no sayings, realistically is when their guard is up, then you're not going to get anything through to them because they are focused on keeping their walls up. However, when the guards would go down, that's when you would hear, the stuff that you wanted to hear. And you go from the I love yous to the I need yous to the I'm overwhelmed, or I can't do this right now, or I need distance. And that to me, like, this was the first relationship with distance, and I've always known that distance isn't a good thing. However, because of how this relationship had started, and realistically, like, she did say in the beginning, like, I need, there's going to be some time that I need space to process things. So it was known to me. So that's the only reason why I chose to, respect, those things, even though it was super difficult for me. I chose to respect that of her because that's one thing that she had asked. So, and it's tough because, kind of get into, moving of the goalposts. She would say one thing, and then come back and, well, say that didn't happen, and I would send her, when I would send her emails, and a lot of our talks were through that because I found it easier to, type it out on a laptop than send it through text. It just, for me, it was easier. It's something that I could see the whole thing. I didn't have to, scroll all the way down and page by page to see what was going on. But, like, I would take accountability for the things that, she thought that she felt that I fell short on. And here's the thing, is I know I wasn't perfect, right? And I'm not saying that I was perfect. I'm saying, like, that I was being judged against her past and not the present. And that was, that's the game changer in that. Because what I did was not necessarily that detrimental. And I've spoken to quite a few people about it. And I said, listen, I want your honest take on it. Because here's the thing is that I need honesty. I need truth. And if I mess up, I will admit it wholeheartedly. I've always been, I've been that way my entire adult life. Simply because it allows me to process and be able to resolve things if I did in fact mess up. But, those things were just like microbursts that festered within her, and it was a focal point. It was a way for her to, when she needed an out, she had that. And now we kind of go into emotional logic that shifts daily, where one day she's connected, the next she's detached, the next she's confused. When you have, and this is kind of going with the goalpost movement, is as I saw within our relationship is it was every couple of months. Every time I had something coming up for me, we were on a break. Something happened. And that was tough because like this year, I remember like we did a polar plunge at the beginning of the year, right? With my gym. And, kind of introducing her to, people at my gym, and like she had met some of them previously, but, it was a way for me to at least, start the new year off fresh, and I felt really good about it. Like, honestly, I did. Like, I was like, 2025 is going to be our year. And, we sat there and we did it. She was 100% on board, jumped in, we did it. And then, that was awesome, right? But then all of a sudden after that, it came to, I forget what the first thing was. Can't think of it right now. No, but like I had a bunch of events, like family stuff lined up. Like in July, I was supposed to go to my buddy's like official wedding. You know, we were we were on a break there. My nephew's graduation party, on a break there. My cousin's summer beach out, summer cookout. We're on a break. Like my birthday, we're on a break. So like all of these things where they mattered to me, and it was, she wasn't there. So like, and then having her try to, me try to, explain the situation, and sometimes over explaining, because I was pushing so hard for her to see it from my vantage point, and come to find out that I could have put it absolutely perfectly and it still wasn't going to register. And that's, one thing that I've learned through this, and why it's like, hey, you can't fix somebody who's not ready. Oh, excuse me, you can't fix anybody, right? Because they have to fix themselves. I based decisions on stability that she couldn't maintain. So that felt like I was, misled in, a lot of it. And that kind of came towards the end when I really kind of sat back and looked at how, after a year where everything had gone seamlessly, absolutely seamlessly, like, even though we did hit, a few hiccups, I thought they were resolved and we kept going, but come to find out those were things that festered. And, from that point on, that's where I kind of was just like, wait a minute, I thought you were in this for the long run. And I told her that from the beginning. I'm like, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. So she knew my intentions straight up. But what I've learned is that for me, it felt like I was misled, but for her, she wasn't intentionally misleading me. Because, here's kind of a messed up thing, is when she told herself certain things, she believed it. Therefore, it technically wasn't a lie that she was telling me. And that's why it felt like a lie, because of how it was presented. Me remaining steady, throughout, while she couldn't. It's not a part of her wiring, because she has, again, with her overthinking and just creating thousands of scenarios and having answers to all of those scenarios. It was an unwinnable battle for me. There's really no chance in me being able to, come out on top. And that was a hard thing to, be like, listen, like I sat there and I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy that this all kind of happened, and no matter what I did, it wasn't going to be there. So the impact that it had on me, and all, like I could go through the trust, self-worth, confidence, stability, emotional safety, and the ability to communicate. Like, yeah, we could go through all of that, but the impact it had on me, it just kept pushing me. And I pushed myself to be better. I pushed myself harder. I literally was pushing myself to the end of the earth to make this right. Because that's what you do in relationships, is you fight and continue to fight. And I was fighting by myself. I was fighting against an unwinnable fight, no matter what I did. And seeing that now, I'm kind of like, oh, like knowing that I did everything right. And that is kind of the tough one to accept, is that I did everything right. 100%. 100% I did everything right. But in the same token, it wasn't right in her eyes. So it didn't matter what I did, and it's something that, really just kind of confused me. Um, and here's the thing is I wasn't angry that she had changed. I was just confused. I mean, I am still confused. No matter how much research I do, I'm still confused over how she's wired, and I'm telling myself it's not. It's kind of like, because she can't even explain it, right? It's it's the fact, like, I just so want to sit her down and just ask her questions, but I know she won't be able to give me solid answers because she's wired for survival. She is not wired for connection. And that, you know, because it's like me growing up, seeing something and hearing something, well, you have to believe it because you're physically seeing it, you're physically hearing it, right? It's different from, if you're hanging out with buddies and they tell you one thing, well, you didn't physically see it and you're only hearing about it, so how can it be real? You have to take that word for it. And, so again, when it comes to like my trust now, I don't know. It's kind of like, I have to, sit them down and have them go through this whole, you know, fill out pamphlet like you're at the doctor's office, right? Tell me about your past medical stuff. What have you actually gone through? Have you gotten help? Are you currently healed? How much medication are you on? So on and so forth. So it's like, when it comes to my trust, it's damaged. I will say that. But in the same token, it's something where I have to, um, just be more, careful, I guess, going forward when looking for people, you know, um, because it really did have me start to, question the reality, question my memory, question conversations, analyze, question motives, and ultimately losing that emotional trust. Um, and when you sit there and you know, when you start to question yourself, something's definitely amiss. It's not right. I mean, I consider myself a pretty intuitive guy. I read situations pretty well, and I mean, I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what wasn't right, you know. And there was a time during that relationship where I thought it was me. I thought I was the problem because I gave everything I had to this relationship. So I was gonna do everything to fix it, when in fact it was a lot of, the majority of the stuff was her projecting what was actually going on inside of her. And which, during one conversation we had is, she mentioned patterns. I'd never heard of patterns in my life when it came to relationships at all. And, because in the past of, her past trauma, she had experienced, one or many people who had specific patterns. And that was kind of the start of it. And I didn't pick up on it until after the fact because I wasn't educated. I didn't know like that this was like really kind of really kind of a thing. So, but ultimately, like hearing her, hearing our conversations and seeing what we talked about and seeing what we sent back and forth to each other, a lot of it, was her just projecting how she was feeling, and the stuff that she couldn't give and stuff that she didn't want to give, stuff that she couldn't fully receive, that was thrown my way to be, sent to me as if I was the problem. So here I am trying to, right the ship and make everything right. When in fact, it was, I was still growing, But in the same token, she wasn't doing anything to help the cause. And that right there, when you have, sorry, when you have, when you have one person doing the work while the other one's sitting back, it's not going to happen. So, now I'm going to kind of get into like the hard truth of everything, and I touched on it before. Is, I said that she wasn't lying to me, which is true. She wasn't lying to me. She was lying to herself. And at the time, I didn't understand the difference. I do now, but I didn't understand how she could lie to herself. And, as I've done, deep dove into this, is to come to find out like her emotional truth is unstable, and that, if you don't have any sort of stability, then, and all you do is you're used to working in chaos, you're used to working in instability, then of course you're going to go through that. Like, you can want things to be stable, but like, her emotional truth was unstable. Again, her attachment patterns conflict with her desires. She wanted the good guy. She wanted to feel seen, feel heard, be heard, have, be loved. She wanted everything. She wanted that, but unfortunately, because of decades of trauma, starting from childhood on up, she was built for survival. And wired for survival. So she didn't know how to receive that connection that she so desperately wanted. And then her moods changed and would override her intention. And the one thing about her is, like, when she got mad, down came the guillotine. Didn't matter. Fucking done. That's just how she's, like, and I knew that from the beginning. But like, that's just how she was. And here's one of the hardest things, is she was ruled by fear, and that overrode whatever connection that we had. Is once fear came into it, didn't matter how strong we thought we were, fear would take over. And then all of those thoughts, all of those, oh, well, he's going to leave me. No, well, we can't make this happen. No, I can't trust him. Because of everything that she had kind of made up in her mind, that, I'm not right for her. She doesn't feel loved. She didn't know how to receive my love. And, having her be ruled by fear is a tough one. It's first for me. Like, this is, this kind of, what I'm about to say is something that, kind of broke me, in the sense of it is, she meant it when she said it. So in the moment, she meant it when she said it. And she meant it when she didn't. Meaning, she was believing the narratives that she had created in her brain, in her mind. Again, those unwinnable battles that you have no clue upon. You're fighting against that. And I didn't realize that until after the fact. But with this is the amount of stuff that I've learned through my growth, through my research. Is consistency defines truth, right? It's not promises, not emotions, not words. Consistency. And whether it's in relationships, whether it's in your day-to-day, whether it's personally or professionally, you will get there if you stay consistent. It's that simple. Emotional instability feels like dishonesty. But It isn't intentional manipulation, it's dysregulation. Because a lot of the things that were going on did feel manipulative. Manipulative? Manipulative? Whatever. It did feel like manipulation because, you know, again, it was something that she wasn't aware of. And it just was ultimately her dysregulation. Love needs more than intensity. It needs stability. Because passion isn't enough, chemistry isn't enough, connection isn't enough. Stability is the foundation of truth, and that's why I'm always honest. And I was honest from day one, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But she wasn't, and I feel that if she was, things possibly would have turned out differently. Who knows? So I've kind of mentioned on, nervous system, and, mine took a big hit. Because I'm wired for consistency. She's wired for survival. And when you have those two patterns, they're like oil and water, they conflict. They don't work. Like I like to talk things out. She would shut down. I wanted to, resolve things by physically being in her presence. She pulled away. She needed the distance. So those are a couple of things that, having this mental health issue as well as this attachment issue, it's a real thing. Like honestly, like and I do, a part of me just truly feels for her because I know everything was real in the moment. Things were said, how we talked to each other, how we looked in each other's eyes, how we were physically, in the moment, it's grand. Like, best. Nothing tops it, honestly. And that's the hard part. Is that I experienced all the things that I had been waiting for. And now, and just to have it go whoosh, cut right off, because it was nothing. It's tough. And that's what I'm currently working through now. To, as I move forward in my journey. So, so I kind of want to, I'm going to end this, by saying she didn't lie to hurt me. She lied because she couldn't maintain the version of herself she wished she could be. So to kind of elaborate on that, it's the mask. It's the mask that she wore in the beginning that I didn't necessarily see until later on when I was starting to pick up on, certain things and how she would do it. But it was really for her own self-protection. Again, survival mode. Her being wired for that as opposed to being wired for connection. It's tough. Her truth changed, mine didn't. And that's why it ultimately broke me. And when you have somebody that is creating all of these narratives, you can't, you're not going to win. And if they start believing them because they said it to them, and again, it's not done in a malicious manner. And that's one of the biggest things that I've had to kind of accept is that this wasn't done maliciously, because I truly believe she loved me. And I truly believe that she wanted to have, create a future with us, integrate our families, have the white picket fence. Actually, no, not white picket fence, but, big house, a lot of space for animals and whatnot. I truly believe that she wanted that. I truly felt that she was seen and she was heard by me. I truly feel that the love that I gave her, she wanted so, so, so bad. I do believe it. She just couldn't receive it. And that is the hard part. And she wanted to receive it, but she couldn't. So, if the truth keeps changing, eventually you'll have to choose your own. And that's why I had emailed her back on the 11th of November and kind of just laying it out there. And I saw her response, and I know it was spoken from an emotional standpoint. It wasn't spoken from the heart. But it was damaging enough to me where at that point in time, I had to say goodbye. Because my peace was being affected by it. And I had untruths being said about me. And I know that was emotionally there. Came from her emotion. It didn't come from her heart. Because I know her heart. I know in her heart she would not do something like that. But emotionally, she was supercharged, man. So, with that being said, I hope I was able to kind of, clarify a little bit more. And I hope you enjoyed this experience. There's going to be more on this, for sure. But, for tonight, this is, I felt the need to get this out there. But, given it's Sunday night, I want you guys to, gear up. Hopefully get your laundry done. That's what I'm doing right now. I gotta go check it afterwards. But I got my food prep done. That's all squared away. And we got Thanksgiving coming up. Thanksgiving. Fortunately, I got a short week at work. And then pick up my daughter on Wednesday, and then we're gonna have a nice Thanksgiving. So I hope you and yours have a great Thanksgiving. Appreciate you guys tuning in, checking this out, and leave a comment. If this resonated with you in any sort of capacity, let me know. Love to hear from you. But till then, talk to you soon.